Shalom and welcome back to Israel with Aline. Today we came to Jezreel, the place where King Ahab and Jezebel's palace used to be. Let's walk together through this place, discover its history and archaeology, and end the day inside Naboth's vineyard, the place of Jezebel's terrible and well-deserved end. So, if you're ready, let's get started. Ahab became king of Israel in 873 before Christ, and he was one of the most famous kings, but not because of his buildings or achievements, but because of his wife and his idolatry. He, together with Jezebel, introduced the worship of Baal in northern Israel and persecuted and killed the prophets of God. And this infamous couple lived part of their reign here in the biblical city of Jezreel. Ahab was king of the entire kingdom of Israel. There were dozens of cities in his territory. So why did he and his dynasty choose Jezreel specifically to serve as the second capital? A place to have a palace here? There are several reasons. First, always having a second palace is a technical advantage because if Samaria, which was the real capital, was threatened, he had a known place where he could take refuge. And he chose this place because we are next to the Jezreel Valley, one of the most fertile areas in all of Israel. So he could closely monitor agriculture here, which was essential for taxes, but also for survival, to literally see that his people had enough food to eat. And also, specifically in the Jezreel Valley, he chose Tel Jezreel because we are on a hill that has a 360-degree view. Here, in every direction you look, you can see enemies coming from a distance, and that's why, strategically and militarily speaking, this place is very special. And now I want to read with you the most important biblical passage that happened here in this city. Sometime later, there was an incident with a vineyard that belonged to Naboth of Jezreel. The vineyard was in Jezreel, next to the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. Ahab had said to Naboth, "Give me your vineyard so I can use it as a vegetable garden since it is next to my palace. In exchange, I will give you a better vineyard, or if you prefer, I will pay you whatever it is worth." Naboth, however, replied, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my ancestors." Then Ahab went home upset and angry. He lay down on his bed, turned his face to the wall, and refused to eat. Jezebel, his wife, said to him, "Is this how you act as the king of Israel? Get up and eat. Cheer up. I will get you Naboth the Jezreelite's vineyard." Then she wrote letters in Ahab's name, put his seal on them, and sent them to the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city. In those letters she wrote, "Proclaim a day of fasting and seat Naboth in a prominent place among the people. Have 2 scoundrels sit opposite him and have them testify that he has cursed both God and the king. Then take him out and stone him to death." And what Jezebel and her accomplice Ahab did brought a great curse upon them. Today we have to look for where all of this began in Ahab's palace. Archaeology in Israel often comes with adventures and also physical challenges. To show the most incredible places in Israel, we've already climbed mountains, gone down to the lowest place on earth, entered caves, and today we're doing this hike. Honestly, this place doesn't have a single spot of shade today. It's starting to get hot, but I promise you it's going to be so worth it. And actually, it already is, because look where we've arrived. This building right behind us is what archaeologists believe to be the palace of Jezebel and Ahab. We know that the capital was in Samaria, but they had a second main building here. And why did I say building? Because the Bible doesn't say they lived in a palace, but rather in an eichal. Eichal is a Hebrew term used for a very large structure, which can be a palace, a castle, or a great fortification, or even the Temple of Jerusalem was sometimes called eichal. So when we say there was a palace here, don't just imagine a palace. Imagine a gigantic complex, and that's exactly what the archaeologists discovered. When they excavated here, they discovered this colossal, rich, wonderful building, as well as 4 protective towers and walls, which we'll see in a bit, that were also found. But of course, the main part is here, where Jezebel and Ahab probably lived during part of the year, most likely in the winter. So come with me so we can explore more. Look how amazing this is. We are walking inside the remains of this fortified palace where Jezebel and Ahab lived. And it's incredible to think that archaeologists confirmed the biblical story here. This palace has been dated to the Iron Age 2B period, which is exactly the reign of Omri and Ahab. We walked around the building, this great palace, so we can see the construction on one side, and on the other side, what we see is the wall. Look here, it's very clear. So this is the wall that was used to protect the whole complex, but of course, mainly the palace of Ahab and Jezebel. This here is the wall, and many people when they pass by don't even realize there's something here, and it looks like a complex of rooms, but this is actually the protective wall. But it's a different kind of wall that existed in the ancient world. It's called a casemate wall. They did the following. On one side, they built a wall, and on the other side, another wall, and in between the walls, there was an empty space. They divided it with several walls, creating a complex of rooms. This complex of rooms could be used in daily life during times of peace as storage, housing, and also as a place where the soldiers themselves could eat, rest, and sleep. And if there happened to be a war or an imminent attack, they would gather stones from all around and fill these rooms, and then from 2 simple walls, they could quickly fill them and build an extremely reinforced wall. So it had a dual purpose. In times of peace, they were rooms and storage, and in times of war, it became an extremely reinforced wall. We can see that this building is quite different from everything we've seen so far. We are inside the remains of a church. What is a church doing here in Jezreel? Jezreel is a biblical city that appears in so many different contexts. They are not beautiful stories from the Bible, stories with a happy ending, but they are very important stories to be studied and taught. Because in this way, we also learn what we shouldn't do, and also the terrible punishment that people can receive for their acts of cruelty, just like Jezebel receives very close to where we are. Back here we can see Kibbutz Jezreel. It was founded in 1948 and it is named after the biblical Jezreel. But what is very interesting is that this kibbutz is dedicated to agriculture. And when the archaeologists started excavating here, one of the things they wanted to learn about was biblical agriculture, more specifically Naboth's vineyard. One of the most well-known stories from this place is related to grape farming and the production of juice and wine. And that's why they asked the kibbutz, which does agriculture throughout the area, and they asked them, have you by any chance tested the soil here to see what kinds of plants are most suitable? And the kibbutz said, yes, we tested several points of the soil to see where we could plant a vineyard, and we found out that this whole area here is not suitable for grapes. However, the other side of the hill is, we tested it and saw that it's a very good soil for growing grapes and consequently for wines and vineyards. However, the geographic space there is not large enough to grow grapes on a large scale to produce wine in the industrial quantities they would like. In summary, what they discovered is that it's an extremely suitable place for growing grapes, but you can't grow infinite quantities of grapes there. A limited area for grape production was found on the other side, and then when the archaeologists excavated there, what did they find? Exactly a vineyard. The vineyard probably belonged to Naboth, and now we're going there to see it. The excavations carried out since 2012 revealed something very different, we can say, at this site. More than 100 gigantic wells were found here, like this one right beneath our feet. These are wells carved into the rock in a shape that resembles an ancient jar. And what were all these underground places used for? It is believed that they served as storage. Some of them were used as cisterns for water, while others were used to store food and drinks. That's because here in Israel, for much of the year, the climate is very hot. And right now, we're in a hot season. We can feel the sun above us, so food would spoil very quickly. So what they did was dig these underground wells and store food down there, where it could last for many, many years in a much milder climate. It is also believed that some of these wells were used to store wine, jars and jars of wine. And this is also connected to the story of Ahab and Jezebel. The king and queen collected taxes from their people. The whole point is that at that time, the use of coins was not something common or normal in this region of the world. So how did people pay their taxes? With food and drink, usually non-perishable things, wine, grains, dried fruits. So all the time here in the palace, they received a very large amount of food and drink to be stored. And probably this was the treasury of the taxes of Ahab and Jezebel here at Tel Jezreel. We are now on the other side of the hill, on the other side of Tel Jezreel, in the area that, according to Kibbutz Jezreel, is the appropriate area for growing grapes. However, we don't expect the plants to survive for 2,900 years, which is the time of Naboth, Ahab, and Jezebel. However, yes, we have archaeological evidence that there were vineyards here, grape cultivation, and the production of juice and wine. And really, what better archaeological proof could we have than this juice and wine factory? And now I want to teach you how they made wine in the time of Naboth. This whole area was full of vineyards, and then they would bring the grapes and fill up this entire space where I'm standing now. They would bring several people here and they would stomp on the grapes barefoot. Why barefoot? because the sole of the shoe, since it's hard, could break the grape seeds and make everything here taste bitter. So they would take off their shoes, put them aside, wash their feet, and then they would come in here, step on the grapes, and what came out was a mixture of juice with the skins and seeds. All this mixture would flow down this channel and fall into this area here where it would stay open to ferment for 3 days. And we see that there are 2 fermentation tanks here, one here on the side and the other one further back. After those 3 days, the family who owned the vineyard would come back here. They would strain all this mixture, meaning they would remove everything that wasn't juice. They would strain it, put only the juice into jars, and we can see that there are spaces prepared here where the jars could be placed. The jar would then be sealed, and a second fermentation process would begin. And with this second fermentation, the juice would eventually turn into alcoholic wine. What is so special about this vineyard? Was it Naboth's inheritance? But what does that mean? Let's take another look at the vineyard. Imagine a job with a large number of grapevines around us, which needed to be big and already have many years in order to produce a large quantity of grapes. The grapevines had to be maintained. The grapes needed to be harvested, brought here, stomped on, the wine drained here, left to ferment, then strained, put into jars, and the jars taken to be sold. It was phenomenal work to have a juice and wine industry at that time. And that's why Naboth didn't work here alone. He worked in this place with his children, and before them his parents and grandparents, and after him his next generations as well. The inheritance was indeed the land, but it was also the agricultural knowledge. It was his and his family's livelihood. If he simply sold this land, he would be putting his financial future and that of his descendants at risk. Because if you give me this vineyard, I can guarantee you that I will have no idea how to turn it into a successful business. But the knowledge that was passed down from generation to generation, that learning was also part of the inheritance. In fact, you inherit not only the plants, not only the land, not only the factory, but also the knowledge of what to do with it. And maybe he could get another vineyard somewhere else, but maybe with a different type of soil, with a different type of climate. Maybe he wouldn't be able to have a successful vineyard somewhere else. So he wanted to secure his future and the future of his own generations through his agricultural knowledge and also obviously through the land. And because of all this, Naboth decides not to sell his vineyard to King Ahab, which was something very courageous. Ahab goes back to his house, lies there sad on his bed, and his wife Jezebel, seeing him upset, asks, "Why are you so sad?" And he tells her what had happened. And Jezebel then says, "Don't worry, the vineyard will be yours." And then Jezebel comes to her husband and says, "I got Naboth's vineyard for you, it's yours." And he is happy about it and takes all this land for himself. Look at something interesting here. He doesn't ask her how she got it. He hears a no and his wife gets it. He doesn't ask himself or ask her how she got it. And maybe it's because deep down he already knew that her ways weren't the right ways. And one more thing that the biblical text doesn't tell us, but that we have to think about on this subject. Naboth dies, but even if he had died of natural causes, this vineyard shouldn't have ended up in the king's hands. This vineyard should have remained as Naboth's family's inheritance. And where is Naboth's family? Why don't they receive this vineyard? So besides the fact that she killed Naboth, she committed at least one more crime, or fraud by stealing this land from the heirs or by killing and threatening his family. One way or another, she manages to get this land by committing yet another crime and gives it to Ahab. And what consequences will they face because of this? They were cursed. The prophet Elijah goes to meet Ahab and says the following: "In the place where the dogs licked Naboth's blood, they will also lick your blood." That's right, your blood. Why did you sell yourself to do what God disapproves of? I will bring disaster upon you, I will consume your descendants, and I will eliminate from your family every male in Israel. And concerning Jezebel, the Lord says, the dogs will devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. I will not bring this disaster during your reign, but during the reign of your son. And as it was prophesied, it happened first with Ahab. He was wounded in battle, and his blood runs down his chariot. He then dies from his wounds and was buried. And that chariot with his blood was taken to a pond to be washed. And there the dogs licked the blood, fulfilling the prophecy. Then his son Achazias becomes king, but he dies after only 2 years. And then his other son, Joram, rises to power, and he rules together with his mother Jezebel. But their reign was also numbered. How does that happen? The prophet Elisha anoints a man named Jehu to be the next king of Israel and to put an end to Joram and his entire family. And then Jehu comes to meet Joram here in the area of Jezreel. And see how there are no coincidences. Of all the places they could have met, the meeting between the two ended up happening here on Naboth's land. And there is a conversation between the two. And when Joram, Jezebel's son, realized where he was and what was happening, he decided to turn his back and run away. And when he starts to run away, he takes an arrow between his shoulders. An arrow in the back that reaches his heart. So he dies here, fulfilling the prophecy that Elijah had made a few years earlier. And what was the fate of the terrible Jezebel? Jehu also goes to her, but where was she? Up here in the palace? It's even written that she had put on makeup. She was all dolled up. Even with her life at risk, even with a rebellion on the way, we can see that her priorities are at least a little strange. And Jehu goes to her, but Jehu was outside the walls. She was up on a tower, and he couldn't reach her. But Jehu didn't need to. He looks at the eunuchs, at the people who were with her, and says, "Are you with her or with me?" Then Jehu ordered, "Throw this woman down." They threw her down, and her blood splattered on the wall and on the horses, and Jehu trampled her. And then she falls to her death, ending her days betrayed and alone. And it makes a lot of sense because everything terrible she had done over the years, God was watching, and the people around her were too. And that's why, at the first opportunity they had, they literally threw her out the window. A truly terrible and lonely death. And her body, what happened to it? Jehu, even though he didn't like Jezebel at all, understands that she was practically the queen and that she should be honored and buried in a proper way. However, that wasn't possible, because between the time she was thrown from the window and when they came to get her body, a few hours had passed. And the wild animals came and ate her remains. And that's why her remains were scattered all over this area, including here on Naboth's land, fulfilling the curse she had received for what she did to Naboth, fulfilling the word of the Lord announced through his servant Elijah the Tishbite. In a field in Jezreel, dogs will devour Jezebel's flesh. Her remains will be scattered in a field in Jezreel like manure on the ground, so that no one will be able to say, "This is Jezebel." And here from Naboth's Vineyard, I want to say goodbye to all of you. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you found it interesting, don't forget to leave a like and share, and I'll see you next week.